Sometimes the smallest moments change everything. What she thought was a quiet afternoon watching her neighbor mend an old fence turned into the beginning of a truth she never expected. The man across the yard, with worn jeans and a steady grip on the hammer, seemed ordinary enough. A single dad simply fixing what was broken. But when he paused, walked over, and handed her a stack of papers with his name printed in bold, her world tilted. Hidden histories, unspoken connections, and the kind of revelation that can shift two lives forever were waiting on those pages. The day was warm, with sunlight pouring through the leaves, scattering patterns across the grass. She had been sitting on her porch, a mug of tea in her hands, watching the simple rhythm of life around her. The house next door had always felt like a mystery. She knew a man lived there with his little boy, but he kept mostly to himself. Sometimes she heard laughter drifting over the fence, sometimes the sound of toys clattering on the patio, but rarely did she see more than a wave when their eyes met. That afternoon, however, he was there, leaning against the wooden boards of the fence that divided their properties, tools at his feet. The old planks had been rotting for months, and now he had finally decided to fix them. She watched as he measured, nailed, and worked with a quiet determination that made her curious. There was something about the way he moved, the care he gave into this simple task, that held her attention longer than she meant to admit. When his little boy ran out with a toy car in his hands, the man bent down, ruffled his hair, and sent him back inside with a smile. It was in that moment she realized he wasn't just fixing a fence. He was building a life, piece by piece, with the patience of someone who had carried heavy burdens and learned to endure. She thought of walking over, offering help, or at least conversation, but something kept her still. She didn't know him, not really, and perhaps he valued the quiet distance. Yet, before she could pull her thoughts away, he noticed her watching. Instead of turning back to his work, he straightened, wiped his hands on a rag, and began walking toward her porch. Her heart fluttered with a strange mix of nervousness and anticipation. He carried not only his tools but also a folder tucked beneath his arm. His eyes, warm yet shadowed, met hers as he reached the steps. "I think I owe you an explanation," he said softly, almost as if he had rehearsed those words. She frowned in confusion. "About the fence?" He shook his head and placed the folder on the small table beside her tea. "About this." Her gaze fell to the papers. Neatly bound, with legal seals and signatures, they bore his name across the top. She reached for them, hesitating before pulling the first sheet free. What she read made her throat tighten. These weren't just repair estimates or neighborhood agreements. They were documents connecting his name to something much deeper, something that linked, unexpectedly, to her own past. She blinked at the words on the page, the ink blurring as her mind scrambled to make sense of them. Adoption records, court documents, a familiar surname she hadn't seen in years. She looked up at him, her breath catching in her chest. "I didn't know how to bring it up," he admitted, his voice low, "but I couldn't keep living next door to you without telling you the truth." She set the papers down carefully, her fingers trembling. Memories flooded back. Her sister, gone too soon, and the child she had left behind. The family had splintered in grief, each relative choosing different paths, promises made and broken in the silence of mourning. She remembered hearing that the boy had been adopted, but after years of distance, the details faded into shadows. And now, here he stood, the boy, all grown up, now a man with a son of his own. Her chest tightened. She tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. He must have read the confusion in her eyes because he continued gently. "My mother kept the papers. When she passed, I found everything, your name, the connection. I moved here because I needed to see for myself. I needed to know if the family I lost was still out there." The air between them grew heavy, filled with the weight of unspoken years. She thought of the times she had wondered about him, the child who vanished from family gatherings, the empty space at holidays. She never imagined he would come back into her life like this, not as a neighbor, not as a father with responsibilities of his own. His little boy's laughter drifted from the yard again, pure and bright, a sound that pierced the tension. She looked past him and saw the child through the slats of the half-fixed fence, playing with his toy car in the dirt. Something inside her softened. This wasn't just about the past. It was about what could still be mended, what family could mean if given a second chance. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say we can try," he answered simply. The simplicity of his plea shook her. She had expected anger or blame or bitterness for the years of separation. Instead, he offered only a chance to rebuild, just as he was rebuilding the fence between their yards. She nodded slowly, tears gathering in her eyes. The world seemed suddenly smaller, the distance of years collapsing into a single shared moment. For the first time, she understood that fences were never just about property. They were about what we choose to keep out or let in. The days that followed carried a strange rhythm, both fragile and promising. She found herself watching him more often, not from curiosity now, but from a growing sense of connection. He came over for coffee, sometimes with his little boy in tow, and the sound of laughter began to fill spaces that had long been quiet. Their conversations stretched late into the evening, unraveling years of questions and forgotten stories. He told her about his struggles as a single dad, the nights of doubt, the mornings of determination. She shared her own regrets, how she had often wondered about the boy her sister left behind, how helpless she had felt as life pulled them apart. There were moments of silence too, heavy pauses when the weight of the past pressed too strongly. But even in those silences there was comfort. They no longer felt like strangers divided by a fence. They felt like two lives finally realigned, threads of the same story woven together again. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in hues of gold and crimson, his little boy tugged at her sleeve. "Can I call you Aunt?" he asked innocently. Her heart swelled and she glanced at the man beside her. His eyes glistened, though he said nothing, only nodded with quiet approval. She bent down, cupped the child's face, and whispered, "I'd be honored." From that moment something shifted. The fence that once marked division now became a symbol of unity. Together they finished mending it, not to separate but to define a shared space. They planted flowers along its base, bright colors spilling over the wood, as if the earth itself celebrated their reunion. In time, trust grew. She became part of their daily lives, helping with schoolwork, cooking dinners, sharing laughter that echoed late into the night. She saw how deeply he loved his son, how much he carried the strength of a man shaped by loss, yet unwilling to surrender to it. And she saw, too, the quiet hope in his eyes when he looked at her, as if life had given him back more than just family. It had given him possibility. It wasn't a story of perfection. The past could not be erased, nor the years reclaimed. But healing was never about pretending the cracks didn't exist. It was about filling them with something stronger. One evening, as they sat on the porch again, he leaned forward, his voice steady but vulnerable. "You thought I was just fixing the fence that first day," he said with a faint smile. "But really, I was hoping to fix something much bigger." She reached for his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. "And maybe we already have," she replied. The stars emerged one by one above them, and for the first time in years she felt at home. Not just in her house, not just in her yard, but in a story that had finally found its way back to her.